excited to welcome in Margit Bannon. Margit, thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Um, can you tell me or the people who will see this a little bit about your background and how did you get into yoga and tennis?
Okay. So I grew up playing the junior circuit through the USTA in Florida, and I got to play some national tournaments and some international tournaments. And then that led me to playing in college. And by the way, I noticed that you are also a fellow MAC player. I played at Miami of Ohio.
Ooh, nice.
So
We called it
I
the
did
heartland
notice
of the
that
mat.
on your website. Yeah, shout out to the Mac. So I got to play in college, and I started teaching shortly after graduating from Miami, which that wasn't the original plan, but that's what happened. And shortly after I graduated from college, I suffered a really bad low back injury.
Hmm.
I was really, I don't know if you experienced this, but when you leave playing competitively through college, you almost have a void because you're not sure. Your identity was wrapped up in being a quote tennis player, and there's a little bit of a freak out in a way because you've done that your whole life, and all of a sudden you're not sure what you're left with. And so at the time, a couple months out of college, I was doing a lot of weightlifting. I was spending a lot of time in the gym because that's what I was used to doing. And I suffered a pretty bad low back injury that I wasn't too smart about. I tried to push through it, and eventually physical therapy led me to some yoga. They were having some yoga in the physical therapist's office in the evenings. I actually wasn't too crazy about it when I started it. I just didn't get it. I thought it was slow. I felt bad at it. And it took me a couple more years to try it again. And then I got into the yoga. At first, when I first started doing it, I could only do it once a week. My body needed time to recover. It was really hard for me.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Florida, so I taught in Columbus, Ohio for about 7 years after graduating college, taught tennis. When I moved to Florida and started teaching down here, one of the tennis clubs that I was teaching at, the person who was teaching yoga at their place moved on, and they knew I was really into yoga. And so they said, well, why don't you come teach yoga? And at the time, I just didn't have a lot of training for that. So I did a very minimal certification just to get my feet wet. And I discovered that there was a lot more that I had to learn, but I actually did like teaching yoga. So I got into teaching yoga, and I've taught now for probably since 2008. Since I got my initial 200-hour certification, I've done education since then as well. And I've always done both separately since then. Like I have my yoga teaching hat, and then I have my tennis teaching, and I had done some periodic yoga for tennis workshops through a local studio, the Yoga Sanctuary that I teach some classes for. And I just had a conversation with my yoga teacher about a year ago at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was talking to him about making this dream a reality, and taking that next leap for my business, play tennis, practice yoga. And he said to me, well, how much time are you actually spending on yoga for tennis? And when I really thought about it, yeah, I was doing some social media, but I hadn't really committed that that's what I wanted to do fully. And then that's when I started the commitment to weekly videos on the YouTube channel. And I basically told myself, okay, I'm not a tennis teacher. I'm not a yoga teacher. I'm a yoga for tennis teacher. So
Nice.
I want to use this as an opportunity to bring the yoga practice to tennis players, because I think it's just such a great group. We need it. I know how much I've benefited from it, and I'm just eager and I'm excited that people like yourself are getting excited and maybe looking at videos and trying some things for the first time. And so I think that that's exciting, just to be able to share with others who are like myself, have played a lot of tennis, maybe teaching a lot of tennis,
Yeah.
and just to offer a little self-care.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said so many really good things there. The one I'm thinking of right now is how you had an injury, and I had an injury back in 2015. I tore my patella tendon and dislocated my kneecap. It was
Oh,
disgusting.
wow.
You know,
Wow.
to your point of what you know how to do, like in college you lifted hard, so you kept lifting hard, and you stopped necessarily doing some of the other little things like stretching, like the yoga. And I mean, ultimately it just, overwhelmed my body. So it's really cool to see how you've combined, yoga and tennis and kind of put those together, because I do think they're like, yoga is a vehicle that can be used in the right way for tennis. And I don't know many competitive tennis players who don't do yoga or don't take hours and hours of time to stretch. And one of the things that I really wanted to ask you is, you know, I know stretching and yoga is very good for tennis, but can you talk about some of the benefits not only for tennis, but for just like your basic health?
Yeah, so I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up doing a lot of stretching. I mean,
No,
it wasn't a thing
I
back
started
then.
I started 5 years ago.
Yeah, so it's challenging when you come from a place of feeling pretty tight and having a lot of tension in your body. It's hard to start. There's so many benefits to yoga. I think most people think of yoga as stretching and stretching alone. So first, I just want to say that there's so much more to the yoga practice. Physical benefits include not only having flexibility, but gaining strength and being able to balance a little more efficiently, and even the agility.
Mhm.
But as far as the stretching is concerned, there's so many ways that we can use the yoga for our tennis. For example, we can do a lot of dynamic stretching before our tennis play. I don't know if this is something that you do on court. Maybe you do some dynamic movement
Yep.
once on court, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, it's something that I'm trying to instill a little more so in my clients now. I've made a commitment as making that part of the tennis lesson, because I know students aren't going to do it on their own necessarily. So we can do some dynamic stretching. And I think after tennis, what's really nice is to dive into that more static stretching where we have those longer holds. So if the dynamic stretching prepares us for play, or maybe helps us shake off some of that tension that we accumulated throughout the night, when we wake up and we feel that, the longer holds can help us gain that long-term flexibility that's a little more appropriate after tennis. And what I'm really finding the most beneficial these days is restorative yoga. I don't know if you're familiar with this term at all. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so think, recovery for those of you who are out there and are not familiar with restorative yoga. I now make it part of my practice to do at least one restorative pose a day. I do it after my lessons as a break in the middle of the day before I begin the yoga portion of my day. So that has to do with being set up in a posture. You're usually on the ground with lots of props where you're stretching passively. You're not physically doing, but you're allowing things to open up passively.
Mm.
And as good as it is for the body, it has a really nice meditative quality to it as well. Doesn't mean that it's easy, because certainly it's hard to sit still for us tennis players who are used to being on the move. For
Yeah.
some of us, these can be the more challenging postures. But I think it's so important because we're used to being on the go. We're used to having a lot of uncontrolled movements on court, to do the opposite, even though it might take us a little time to get comfortable with that type of a practice. That's not usually the type of practice that people will start with. So people will usually start with a more dynamic practice, especially if the player is younger. You need to keep their attention. They might be gravitating to what's known as power yoga or an Ashtanga yoga practice, where it's a little more vigorous in nature. They're sweating. They're getting the breath going. Um, that's actually how I started in my 20s. But then I came to realize after practicing for a couple of years that I actually needed the exact opposite, where I needed it for recovery. I needed it to be slow, so that I could do all of the other things that I wanted to do on court to balance out the faster pace training that we encounter as tennis players.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many things you just said there that I didn't even know, right? Just in terms of all the different elements that there are as you think about yoga and the different ways that it can be used. And it just to me shows the importance of really focusing on those little things. And to me, yoga isn't a little thing, but it's like one of those things, like as a player, sometimes you may not spend as much time because you want to hit extra serves, but you spending more time, doing restorative yoga, doing other types of yoga, like you said, I mean, I think that's gonna help with injury prevention. And I've long said that yoga is a good way to prevent injury. But I don't have any solid facts or figures to validate that. But I was curious, from your perspective, being an expert, would you say that's true? And if it is, how come?
I would say that it's true. I mean,
Okay.
what seems a little more obvious is that, picture a player like Novak Djokovic doing the splits as he goes out for a ball.
Yeah.
Obviously we want to have, and it's nice to have those role models to see how flexible they can be. We want to be flexible because, as you know, we can't really stop ourselves as we're going for a shot. The body does certain things. And so it would make sense that we would want to prepare the body for taking those types of shapes. Obviously, he's an extreme with regards to flexibility. I'm the opposite. I was never very flexible. And so um, some players are more flexible naturally, some aren't. But I think one of the most important things, if we're going to talk about flexibility and the yoga practice, is that these postures help make us more aware of what's happening in our bodies. Meaning, we've gotten very good at ignoring warning signs in the body. We have little aches and pains. We ignore them because we hope that they're going to go away. Those aches and pains get a little more profound, and then we have the deeper injury because we weren't really listening. We're very good at ignoring these signs. So literally speaking, if you're in a yoga pose, when practiced mindfully, that means you're paying attention. You're teaching yourself how to relax and how to relieve tension, and you're just getting to know how your body feels, and it just helps you in spotting these things earlier on a daily basis. So if we pay attention on a yoga mat, we might be able to pay attention off the mat when we have these warning signs on the court or throughout our day. And I think the misconception is sometimes we think, oh, well, we don't have a lot of time. Now I have to carve out an hour to practice a yoga class. And that's not true. You had a good example of, wanting to hit an extra basket of balls or whatever for your serve. And so if you're going to do that, and, I have suffered a shoulder injury as well. You can do that, and it's very appropriate to take a pose or two afterward to help you, right? So that you recover a little bit better, so that you don't feel as tight, especially if you already have an area that leans towards um, having a little more challenge in that way. So, for example, for myself, because I know, I have lower back issues before I go out on court, I'm going to do a set of range of motion exercise for myself
Yeah.
before I even do the dynamic stuff on court, just because I want to prepare myself in the best way that I can. And a lot of times we can't prevent things completely, but if we can help them or make it less likely, of course, why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah, and one of the things you said that really struck me was the warning signs are there. You know what I mean? And I think even from my college tennis days, I don't want to say you were taught to play through the pain, but you were taught, at least we were, not to complain too much, right? So you
You
were
are, in a sense, though. I mean, we were taught you don't show you're in pain because otherwise that's weakness, and then they're going to run you around the court. So, yeah, we
true.
were taught to put it on it. And in fact, I remember very clearly one year at the 16s Nationals in San Diego. It was around the time I was first starting to feel some low back, not as serious, but I had some warning signs of tension, and someone brought it up, like, oh, I have to go to the physical therapist to get a massage or before I play. And I was in a group of three or four girls, and they all said, me too, me too, me too. And that was really eye-opening for me because we didn't talk about those things then. So yeah, we were taught that no pain, no gain mentality, basically.
And I do yoga now more than ever because my body is a vehicle that drives revenue, a piece of the revenue, that I make on a daily basis. So,
Of course.
if you're prone to injury, I mean, that's gonna hurt you, more so than not. So for me, it's, especially as I get older, it's very important that I do those little things and make sure every morning I wake up, I take 15 minutes to do either yoga or just a basic stretching or something before I get on the
Nice.
court. And now I'm doing dynamic stretching. I mean,
Good.
5 years ago, I mean, in my 20s after college tennis, it was all about like I show up, I lace up the shoes or not,
Okay.
and then I just start playing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And now I'm like, I got to show up 20 minutes early to the course. I got to get up
Yeah.
early to stretch. Like, because I know that if I do feel something, it could be a sign that maybe if I don't take care of it, something bigger is going to come.
Well, I mean, chances are it's not just getting older, but when we are this active, it doesn't matter how old you are. There's a good chance, we have a lot of overuse going on.
Yeah,
It's very likely. I mean, look at the pros. They have the best access to the best physios,
absolutely.
masseuses,
Absolutely.
chiropractors, and you're hearing about these injuries left and right. But what I really like too about what you're saying, that you're forming this routine before you go on court, is that, and I think it's so important to instill this in our students as well, like when they see you lead them through some dynamic stretching on court, is that you're signaling the body and the mind that you're preparing to play, so you're already getting in the right frame of mind through the body. So it's, I was just having a conversation with some of my league ladies this morning who still do not do a proper, and I'm not even talking dynamic warm up, I'm talking about the proper warm up before a match.
Mm.
So, I was a little hard on them today, but it's like, how do we expect to perform when we're not taking the time to do this? And that's part of, again, not just physical preparation, but the mental. You're going through your ritual, almost like you would in a serve, when you go through all these little things, to do it the same way every time. We're beings that need repetition, at least in the sport. At least I believe in that.
Yeah. One more question for you.
Sure.
Um, what advice would you give to, let's say, a junior or an adult, someone who is, I mean, we're all naturally gifted, but someone who's very good on the court, they don't really care about the little things. They're hard to listen to. Like, what advice would you give them in terms of like taking care of the little things and doing yoga and implementing that in their daily routine?
Well, when you're young, it is hard because when you're not feeling the need, it's harder to be motivated. But I think it's so important for especially younger players, and this is why social media is great, to see their heroes in what they do, to
Mhm.
see their coaches, walking the talk. It's important for those students to actually see that. I mean, we're visual learners. So if they see that their favorite player, a Novak or a Maria Sharapova or an Azarenka, whoever it is, doing these things, they're going to be more likely to do them. With that said, again, I would start very small, maybe just one posture after practice. Maybe there's a certain stroke that they want to
Yep.
improve, right? So, hey, this posture or this stretch is going to help you with your serve or with your volley, whatever it is. Maybe just making it more relatable in that way.
Yeah. No, that
I do
makes.
think that younger players are more open to this though than we were. It's becoming more the norm, meaning even just a few years ago, yes, we heard about the pros doing it, but at least especially in my area where I teach an older population, it's not the norm, but it's people are becoming more accepting of it. And I think, conversations like this help too, when we're talking about it and when we're seeing other tennis players practice yoga. That's the reason why I formed that YouTube channel. And I love it when I hear from other pros that they're making it a little more into their routine. And it's going to come from us too, right? Setting the example.
Yeah, and I think I was on the boom. I mean, I was in college from 2004 to 2008, so I was kind of on that social media boom, but there was no Instagram, so it wasn't easy to, watch Roger Federer practice or see where he's playing or things like that. So to your point, I think things have changed and they can actually see, well, Novak can do the splits. How is that possible? well, he's doing X, Y,
Right.
and Z. Maybe I need to try to do X, Y, and Z and improve my flexibility in my hips. Therefore, maybe I won't be able to do the splits, but maybe I'll be able to get that one extra ball that's going to win that extra match and is going to help me get that college scholarship. So I do think it's about, seeing what your favorite pros are doing and then trying to figure out what makes sense for you to do as you look to implement things in your daily routine.
Definitely. I mean, don't you love lately how they're showing much more of what the pros are doing before they go on court on TV? Like they're showing players in the gyms now working with their bands and doing all these cool hand-eye coordination exercises. Like I love it that they're showing that more. We need to see more of that. Um, Players need to know that they just don't walk out on court. They've already warmed up with their team for a good amount of time, and then they get into the gym. And I mean, it's constant. These things just don't happen. You have to put in the work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed. I mean, I'm tired at watching them warm up just to play the match. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
some girls or some men, some women, like they're in full out like sweat. I gotta switch my
Yeah,
clothes, and I'm like, I'm just tired watching them. So, and they're gonna get ready to go play another 3 or 4 hours. So,
that's
um,
right.
it's what I call like the best part, in my opinion, about being a pro is showing what being a pro is. You know what I mean? It's not just when
Everything that goes into it, right? It's not just
exactly
the wins, it's the day to day, and it's those little things that add up to a lot. Pose here, 5 minutes of practicing something here at home. It's all of those little things that add up, and we don't have to think of it as this. Oh, we have to do all of this. We just have to take it in very small pieces.
right.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
mhm.
Um, this honestly, this was great, and really liked it because I just feel like it's so important as it relates to tennis or sports or even just your mental health, especially nowadays.
Yeah,
It's one of the new found things I would say over the last 18 months that I've do daily, and it's been such a good, not only a release for my body but a release for my mentality as well. So um,
great.
kudos to you for what you do. For everybody that watch this, where can they look you up? Where can they find you?
Well, I have a website which is playtennispracticeyoga.com. That's all one word. But I would really love people to check out my YouTube channel, which is play tennis period practice yoga period. And I do a weekly video on Tuesdays. I'm calling it Yoga for Tennis Tuesdays. And I'm kind of alternating right now where I do postures on the mat on the court to show a yoga posture, but then I'm also doing tennis drills every other week, trying to make that mind body connection. So it might be a tennis drill, but we have a very specific mental focus. Maybe we're focusing on what the feet are doing or a specific feeling or a sound. There's a lot of ball watching drills, those sort of things. So making that connection between tennis and yoga. And I'm also hoping that I get viewers that way. Maybe they look it up for the tennis drill and then they get caught up watching a yoga practice. And there are some mini classes on there, but there's also a playlist called One Pose at a Time. So you might just take one pose that appeals to you. And again, start small. And then if you have the desire, if you have the time, if it works for you, I've had a lot of great feedback from people who've been practicing the videos. I'd love for people to check it out and subscribe and let me know how these practices do for you. I love to hear that feedback because that just helps me out a ton as a teacher as far as what your body is needing, what helps, what doesn't. I'm open to it all.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that makes you as good as you are. You're open to feedback and you're still looking for ways to improve and create. I mean, I think that's what the best coaches in the world do. And obviously you're a great coach and yoga instructor as well.
Thank you. I
Professional.
appreciate it.
Yeah. So again, I really appreciate the time. This has been great, and I look forward to keeping in touch and following you and seeing not only new poses but how you evolve and how things continue to progress.